Unfortunately, the rumors are true. I did not get an invite to Coachella this year. To everyone's surprise and dismay, I do not know what the holdup is. I can only assume that they have something huge planned for me next year. Also, this video is sponsored by Surfshark. More on them later. So the first of 2 Coachella weekends just happened, and of course there's lots of drama. The headliners for this year are Sabrina Carpenter, Justin Bieber, and my queen, Karol G. There's been a lot of buzz about this year's Coachella, and potentially the reason for that is because over the past few years, tickets, they weren't popping off like they had been in the past, but with Justin Bieber headlining, tickets started selling out like they used to, and everybody wanted to be there to witness this, especially since Justin hadn't done a big performance like this in a while, so everybody was frothing at the mouths to see him. Of course, the other headliners and artists drew in significant crowds as well, but I think Justin performing was a huge selling point for a lot of people. But this recent resurgence in popularity probably contributes to the first point we'll be talking about, the Airbnb cancellation apocalypse. Coachella is one of the major events of the year, and people prep months in advance and thus book accommodations months in advance. Historically speaking, hotel rooms and such are super expensive because there's this huge influx of people coming to this area for these 2 weekends specifically, and the prices only get worse the more you wait. This is common for any event, but it's especially bad for Coachella. Apparently, there have been a few cases this year where just days before people's Coachella stay, the Airbnb host straight up cancels their reservation, even though these people booked, again, months in advance, and then what the host would do was they would relist the same exact listing at a much higher price for the exact same dates that they just canceled it for, which is obviously terrible. I'm confused why Airbnb doesn't have a framework already in place to prevent this sort of thing from happening, because I'm sure this has happened before. I'm sure this is not the first time, and there should 100% be consequences for the host if they're able to straight up cancel someone's reservation with barely any notice and then relist that very same place during the time frame the person originally had the reservation for. These hosts clearly want to make the most money as possible and are able to do so because of supply and demand, and it's super unfortunate that several people got fucked over because of these greedy bitches. Also, I should mention that Coachella takes place near Palm Springs in the desert of Coachella Valley. So if you go to Coachella, of course, it's important to stay hydrated and wear sunscreen throughout the day to protect yourselves physically. But it's also important to know how to protect yourselves when you're browsing online as well. That's why the sponsor of today's video, Surfshark VPN, is so helpful, because through various methods like encrypting your online data when you're using public Wi-Fi, or by preventing companies and bots from tracking your personal information, Surfshark keeps you protected. And Surfshark allows you to use one account on an unlimited number of devices, so you'll always be protected. But my favorite thing about Surfshark is actually the fact that it allows you to access content from around the world that you normally wouldn't be able to see. Fun fact, for certain streaming platforms like Netflix, the content available can be completely different depending on where you are in the world. But with Surfshark, you're able to quickly and easily change those location settings and get access to tons more content. For example, my favorite show of all time, Attack on Titan, unfortunately is not available on Netflix in the US anymore, but it is on Netflix Japan, so now I'm able to watch to my heart's content. With a 30-day money-back guarantee, there's no risk to trying it out. So head to the link in my description, surfshark.com/ToddHunter, or use my code ToddHunter to get 4 extra months of Surfshark VPN. Thank you so much to Surfshark for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to it. Another wave of unprofessionalism that we've been seeing with Coachella 2026 is content creators getting uninvited from brand trips. So one thing that happens at Coachella is that brands invite influencers to these like pop-up content houses. Elf did one, Starbucks did one, Poppy did one. One creator that I do follow and love is Mickey. Poppy apparently invited her and like 10 friends out to Coachella and made this mansion for her, the Mick Mansion, and they got to stay there, and it was like specifically catered and designed for her. Like, how awesome is that? And that's an extreme example, I think, of a brand, going the extra mile for the creator that they invite. But in general, what I think happens is brands pay for influencers to go to Coachella, and in return, these influencers post a bunch of content related to their brand, and their brand gets a lot of organic views. And this is the dream for an influencer, right? Because they get to go to Coachella, something that they probably really want to go to anyway, expense free. And we'll get into it later, but believe me when I say Coachella is a super expensive endeavor. The barrier to entry finance-wise is crazy. You should expect to pay at least $1,000, and you know what? Probably you're gonna end up spending at least a couple $1,000s. That's kind of insane for one weekend. And apparently something that has been happening to a few creators recently is that brands have reached out to them offering to take them on one of these Coachella brand trips, which is kind of like the holy grail. It's like the freaking pot of gold at the end of the rainbow that these creators are desperate for. And so obviously the creator responds and they're like, OMG, I'd love to go, send me the details. And then the brand seems to straight up ghost them for a little bit of time until eventually they break the news and say, so hey, we overbooked and can no longer take take you with us. No hard feelings, right? Bitch. Now, in my opinion, it's one thing for Airbnb hosts to pull the rug out from under people because at the end of the day, they're just people renting out their property. They're self-employed, you know, they're not an employee of Airbnb pulling this shit. What we have going on here is actual brand employees, like marketing people, whatever, acting in this incredibly unprofessional manner. And granted, it's not acceptable regardless, like from a moral and professional standpoint, whether they're an employee or whether they're an independent contractor. But it just blows my mind that these brands can dangle like a little carrot in front of these creators and be like, you want this? Psych! We actually don't want your loser ass and don't have room for you because we were able to get someone better. You know, that's not what they said outright, but like that's the sense that you get from reading in between the lines. And now you've like fundamentally damaged your relationship with this creator, which I feel like you'd want to avoid as a company with a reputation to uphold. You've now gotten someone's hopes up and left them hanging all because you were disorganized on your end. I would be pissed! And now, this brings us to the general entitlement of it all. So Coachella, like I said, is not really accessible to the average person due to how expensive it is. Let me paint you a picture so that you can get a ballpark figure for what it might cost you. And this is like, I'm being very generous with the estimates here on the lower end of the side. Like, I'm trying to give you bare minimum ballpark figure, right? So originally, general admission tickets for Coachella were around $600. $600. Now granted, you know, arguably you get a lot of bang for your buck. You're seeing all of these artists in one freaking place. But also they organize it so that the biggest artists, like, it's hard to watch all of them. I think there was like a common thing of people being annoyed that Katseye was performing at like this specific time on one end, and then on the completely other opposite end, Sabrina Carpenter was performing and there was like barely any time to get there, but like that's besides the point. Resale ticket prices are of course going to be more expensive. Like you could be seeing upwards of $1,000. The cheapest accommodation would be on-site camping, meaning you set up camp in/around your car, and that's a minimum of $150 a night. If you wanted to splurge on a hotel or something similar, you would be looking at bare minimum of like $400 a night. And again, I'm being conservative with the prices to illustrate that even if you were to craft the most budget-friendly plan for Coachella, you'd probably still be, again, looking at upwards of $1,000 for this one weekend. Obviously, in the festival itself, the food prices are gonna be devious. You'd be hard-pressed to find anything under $20. And this creates a crazy environment and like a crazy disparity because you have people who are fighting tooth and nail to be able to go to Coachella in the first place and then possibly sacrificing other things at the event itself in order to make things work. And you know, they're like saving up all of this money because it's going to be an expensive endeavor. And meanwhile, you have influencers who not only have all of their accommodations and travel provided for them, and also, you know, they're getting the free ticket, but sometimes they're even paid to be there. They're paid extra on top of all of that shit. And it's always been that way. Like, it's always been counterintuitive that, like, the more famous and the more rich you get, the more people shower you with free stuff that you don't even need. Coachella is sometimes referred to as the Influencer Olympics because that's definitely what it's become. So I believe the only tickets for Coachella that are available for purchase are general admission, which is around $600, like I said, and VIP, which is originally around like $1,200. And then a tier up from VIP is an artist pass or an artist guest pass, I believe, which is something you can't buy, but brands sometimes will gift influencers these passes as part of the brand deal, and this gets you access to the most exclusive sections of Coachella. All right, you don't have to be mingling with the peasants. This is where all the famous people are at. This is where all the top tier celebrities are at. Tana Mojo actually made a TikTok talking about her experience in this artist section while watching Justin Bieber, and she said that a lot of people around her were so obnoxious and entitled and were very ungrateful and rude because they weren't appreciating Justin's performance or just Coachella in general, and it seemed like they were there just to say they were there for the clout of it all. And people have talked about a lack of concert etiquette since COVID, and maybe this is an extension of that in terms of people talking over the artists as they're performing or being disrespectful to other concert attendees or like just being really rude and disrespectful to the actual artists themselves. And after hearing all this, I'll just say being at Coachella sounds like my literal nightmare, unless of course a brand is thinking of inviting me, in which case I love it. I've always said that. I don't enjoy the stadium concert / huge music festival experience. Like I don't like it. I think it really has to do with the scale of the matter. I think that that's the main problem that I have with it. But when it comes to these huge sorts of concerts, I really do want to and wish I could enjoy them, but every time without fail, 10 minutes into the experience when the music is blaring so deeply into my eardrum, causing what I'm sure is irreparable hearing damage, and all the while I'm up close and personal with a bunch of loud and sweaty strangers, I can't help but think to myself, man, I think I would genuinely have a better time listening to this exact song in my room with my Sony headphones on in pitch black darkness. And you may be like, Amanda, like, that's so crazy of you. How can you say that when the artist is literally right there performing it in front of you? Aren't most of us watching those big ass screens the majority of the time? And then you're like, well, no, it's not actually about seeing the artist, it's about hearing them, their vocals live. I have yet to attend a concert where the artist has exceeded what they sound like in the studio, because like more often than not, they sound very similar to what their studio version of their song, which is awesome and they're super talented. But again, this brings me back to the whole thing of, well, I might as well be listening to this in the comfort of my own home because it sounds the same, just like really, really, really loud. Anyways, I know a crazy thing to say. That's just what's so true to me. I am who I am. And that's not to say I have a terrible time at these concerts by any means. I always have a good time. It's just never been great. Anyways, but that being said, let's get into the public's reaction to Justin's performance. First, he performed a lot of the songs from his most recent album, Swag, but to everyone's pleasant surprise, he also did a lot of throwbacks at the end. I'm talking Baby, That Should Be Me, Beauty and the Beat, Never Say Never, all banger after banger. The method in which he performed these songs is what people had an issue with. Justin's performance was essentially him and his MacBook against the world. He performed his newer songs, and then when it came time for the oldies, he literally went onto YouTube, screen shared his MacBook screen so that everybody could see his screen, and then played the old music videos of his songs and sang along to them. There's like a video / tweet of Katy Perry who was in the crowd during this performance, and she said, "Thank God he has premium," because he was pulling up all these YouTube vids of himself with nary an ad in sight. By the way, apparently I was the last one to know that Katy Perry is dating former Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau. Okay. Alright, let me give you the pro-Justin response, the anti-Justin response, and then my take. So, the Beliebers were completely captivated by his performance. They loved it, they thought it was meaningful and true to him, and that the vocals ate and it felt intimate and casual in the best ways. And they're also claiming that the reason Justin played his old songs in this manner is because he doesn't own the rights to them, and this was some sort of loophole in order to be able to perform them. And then other people, like kind of the haters, are saying that Justin was the highest paid headliner and should have put more effort into his performance, and that there was no set design, no bells and whistles, no choreography, and all of that garnered a lot of critique and criticism. And there was also the argument that he's only able to get away with this because he's a man, and women especially would face tons more scrutiny if they were to pull a stunt like this. In my opinion, I don't like that sort of hypothetical argument like, well, if he were this or if she were that. Enough. I think it's gotten to the point where that argument isn't doing what you think it's doing, and I don't think it's wrong for people to feel dissatisfied with Justin's lack of production. However, I do think that it is very on brand for him currently. I mean, at the most recent Grammys, he performed Yukon with nothing but his guitar and undies, which fans are saying is symbolic of his journey in this industry. And also these sorts of performances purposefully highlight his natural talent, and like maybe this is all what he's going for. And he also started on YouTube, so this is him going back to his roots. And I think that his playfulness with the audience is also very on brand for him. To the people saying, well, Sabrina could never, correct. She would never do that sort of performance at this current moment in time, but I don't think it really has anything to do with her being a woman or her feeling like she needs to go above and beyond because she's a woman. I think it's more about her current branding and the precedent she set for herself. She's known for these elaborate sets and like a kind of Taylor Swift-esque showmanship. Maybe that's not the correct comparison, but I don't know. And of course, women are in general held to a higher standard, but I don't think that this is the biggest element at play here. I think it's about the branding and the creative direction. I don't think that Justin skimped out due to laziness. I think that this is just where he's at right now as an artist, which is evident in his other recent performances, and it's in line with his current personality. Like I said, on the other hand, Sabrina's performance was the polar opposite of Justin's and was well received for the most part. Her set went crazy, the choreography went crazy, vocals went crazy. I mean, her rendition of We Almost Broke Up Again last night was simply magical. She also brought out Susan Sarandon to do a monologue thing, which was cool because apparently she was blacklisted from Hollywood for her pro-Palestine advocacy, which I actually didn't even know that until people were talking about this on TikTok. However, there was one particular moment in the performance where she had an interaction with a fan that went viral for all the wrong reasons for her, and apparently the clip of this is getting copyrighted like crazy, so I'm just gonna act it out for you. In most of the clips that I originally saw on TikTok, it was just lost the audience's perspective, so we only heard Sabrina's side of the conversation. So POV, I'm Sabrina talking to a fan. I think I heard someone yodel. Is that what you're doing? I don't like it. That's your culture? Is yodeling? Is this Burning Man? What's going on? This is weird. So apparently, when the fan was talking to her, they were like, yeah, you know, I am yodeling. It's an Arab call of celebration. And so that was their end of the conversation. That was their responses. And you can hear that on the YouTube live stream. And so then Sabrina came out with an apology saying, my apologies, I didn't see this person with my eyes and couldn't hear clearly. My reaction was pure confusion, sarcasm, and not ill-intended. Could have handled it better. Now I know what a zagruta is. I welcome all cheers and yodels from here on out. I could see the scenario where she thought that the fan wasn't being serious, so then she had an unserious response, and then now it reflects badly on her because the fan actually was being serious, even though she wasn't ill-intentioned. However, I can also see the other side where people are saying that this interaction potentially really highlights her ignorance. And to be honest, I'm a little bit baffled that Sabrina's PR senses weren't tingling whatsoever during this interaction. And that's not to say that her primary motivation should be her own image when it comes to handling these things respectfully. But in my cynical mind, I can't say for certain whether a celebrity is a good person or has good intentions. What I can say for certain is that they care about their own success and therefore their own image. And the thing that gets me is I can understand having an unserious response if someone, for example, were to say watching slushy noobs is my culture. But yodeling and different types of vocalizations like yelling, singing, chanting, first of all, are very common in a concert setting, are they not? And second of all, those are all very commonly cultural manifestations. She was acting like yodeling being someone's culture was outside the realm of possibility when it very clearly falls in it. But again, she said that she couldn't hear or see well, but she was also responding to what they were saying as if she could hear them clearly. You know, because her responses were making sense given what the other person was saying as well. I don't even know. And then to follow that whole interaction up with, that's weird, in a potentially sarcastic, albeit disdainful tone, was definitely not cool in general, and especially not a good look. So yeah, she's confused. You're confused? I'm fucking confused, bro. Finally, we get to the Katseye of it all. And I potentially maybe have some hot takes coming, so prepare yourself for that. I don't know. So, if you don't know anything about Katseye, I have a video on that which can catch you up to speed if you're completely in the dark. But basically, Hybe, the company who created BTS, I believe, meticulously crafted and curated this global girl group which has 6 members: Lara, Daniela, Megan, Yoonchae, Sophia, and Manon. Manon is the visual, and I feel like she stands out for a variety of reasons. She's the only black member of the group. The tone of her voice is distinct and on the lower end compared to the other members, which I do deeply miss now that she's not in the group. And I also feel like she was one of the most popular members from what I've seen, but maybe my perception is skewed because of everything that's been going on recently. But she's often the topic of conversation due to the reasons that I mentioned on top of other things, because after Popstar Academy, which was the documentary about the formation of Katseye, which is available on Netflix, after that aired, there has also been the running narrative that Manon doesn't pull her weight in the group. In the documentary, the creative director of training and development for Katseye called her selfish, and the other girls in the program expressed how they couldn't rely on Manon because she consistently missed practices and didn't seem to take the program seriously at first. And there are other factors, such as, I believe Manon admitted this herself, saying that she was insecure a little bit at having to catch up with all the other girls because she's the only one with no prior dance training, and the fact that she was scouted and received special treatment and prioritization, which caused jealousy among some of the other girls who are also in the program. And then after Katseye's debut, there was also an official fan quiz released by Hybe in some sort of magazine, I think, where the question was, what does Manon think is her best feature? And 2 of the options that were there were her selfishness and her laziness, which is crazy. And so in terms of why there's such a heated debate online and why people are on completely different pages, to me, that's for a couple of reasons. I think there are 2 main things at play here: the accuracy of this narrative, which people have different opinions on, and the validity of Manon's absences, which people have different opinions on. So first of all, in terms of the accuracy of this narrative, I think a lot of the people who really support Manon get hung up on the word lazy itself and say, well, how can Manon be lazy if she worked to the point where she's able to debut with the other members and not look like she's leagues behind them? And that's a good point. point. However, I think lazy is not the exact right word to use in this context. I think that the people who have issues with her, I think the main point of contention for them, and also the main point of contention internally with Manon and the companies, is the fact that she's maybe not showing up as much compared to the other members. And there is at least some agreement that that was the case, I think, at the beginning of the training and development program, which was highlighted in the documentary. But again, it crafts its own narrative of the things that happen. It's not necessarily the truth of what happened. Now we get to the point of like, is that the case now? Is she still not pulling her weight now? I feel like we don't have as much insight on that. Now we get into the validity of her absences. And this is tricky because certain cultural things come into play too. So being sick, of course, is a valid reason for absences, and I believe that that's been Manal's reason whenever she's been absent. And Manal was out sick for a portion of time after her debut, and so she was absent from certain things. But she wasn't the only one that's been absent from things. Megan and Daniela were also out for injuries, but some people seem to think that being sick is a less valid excuse than being injured. Manal has also said that in Switzerland, the culture is very different in terms of taking time off. No one is expecting you to work if you don't feel up to it. And that's very different from pushing yourself to an unhealthy degree, which is very normalized in America. So we have all these factors, right? And on top of that, there are allegations that the companies Hybe and Geffen have been racist towards her and that they painted her in a lazy and selfish light on purpose. And I feel like it's not my place to speak on that particular point. And I'm going to be honest, I don't really understand the difference between Hybe and Geffen, so if you know, feel free to explain in the comments. To me, it seems clear that the companies desperately wanted Manal in the group, no matter what. And from a logistical and business standpoint, I feel like they stand to gain the most with Manal debuting and continuing to be in the group. Also, I think that it seems clear that both companies want the members of Katseye to have a particular work ethic, to be someone who's willing to work themselves to the bone and put the group first and do everything they can to show up and be 100% every single day, aka to be agreeable workaholic puppets. You know, that's what they want in this girl group that they perfectly crafted and curated and manicured to be successful. I feel like the training and development program indicated that Manal was not that type of girl. She did not fit that bill. And that's neither a good or a bad thing, that's just what it is. So there's always been these conflicting feelings of really wanting her for the group, but also knowing that she's probably not the right fit. But ultimately, I feel like when there was the decision for Manal to debut, there has to be some responsibility on both parties. The companies chose to debut Manal after observing her during her training and development. Manal also chose to be in the group after understanding the crazy things that would be expected of her after undergoing the program. However, after debuting, there still seemed to be this conflict because on February 20th, it was announced that Manal would be going on hiatus indefinitely. And this caused, obviously, quite the stir. And there was so much speculation as to why and when and if she would come back. So then when Pinky Up, their new single, was released, people were convinced that that was when Manal would come back. They were really looking for her to be in the MV and everything and then in the promotional stuff. But guess what? She did not come back. She was not anywhere to be seen. Then there was this expectation that Manal would return for Coachella. You know, it's been her dream and everything, even if it would potentially be her last performance. But Katseye performed as just 5 members at Coachella, pretty much cementing the fact that Manal probably won't be returning. Although Manal was still at Coachella as an observer in the crowd, although I don't think that she was watching Katseye's performance. I could be wrong, maybe she was. If you still don't understand why people have such mixed feelings on this, let me give you a little analogy. Let's say you're in a group project and every single person is going above and beyond and contributing to said project except for one member. When the teacher decides to take out this one member, everybody else in the class starts shitting on the teacher and the remaining members. And so I feel like this paints one picture and potentially explains why there are some people who are like mad at Manal. But then, what if I told you that this group project fosters super unhealthy and toxic work practices and this one member is actually doing what's right for their own well-being and standing up for the standards that they probably all should have? See, now that complicates things a little bit, right? And there's also other stuff happening behind the scenes that we don't know about, and that's why this is so complicated. And I love Manal. I think she's awesome. I think she's cool. It just seems like her and the companies are always going to clash, and neither party is ever going to be completely satisfied. So this may be the best solution, even though it sucks for the fans, because Katseye is one member down. So yeah, that's been all the drama and controversies, and this has only been the first half of Coachella, guys. There's still maybe lots more to come. Maybe I'll have to make a part 2 to this, or maybe I won't, and it'll be completely smooth sailing, although I highly doubt that. Also, again, huge thank you to Surfshark for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to click the link in my description to get an amazing discount. Thank you so much for being here as always. I love y'all. Talk to you later. Bye!